Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. Let's meet this week's panel. First of all, our resident faith leader, the Pastor Shannon Wright. Pastor Wright, good to have you back. Radio talk show host Dan Joseph, and attorneys Billy Murphy and Chris Kennedy. Now let's start with the Key Bridge disaster, where late Thursday evening, the U.S. Corps of Engineers reported that the Port of Baltimore should reopen with limited access by the end of this April and completely reopen to shipping by the end of May. President Biden at the port surveying the damage, offering the nation's condolences to the families of the bridge workers who died, and meeting with those heartbroken loved ones. And let's kick it off with Dan Joseph. What a tragedy. Dan.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's something that there's really no contingency plan for if you work in the government, right? Or if you're just a member of society in the Baltimore area. I have people who are spending, twice as much time in traffic now than they were before. The supply chains have been interrupted. And like I said, there was really no expectation that a bridge is going to collapse in your community. It just isn't something that they prepare for. I'm glad to hear that they're moving towards at least some kind of fix for the port and for the roads. But again, we're going to be without a bridge for some number of years now. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned to what this does to the economy. I'm concerned what this does to the commute.
Chris, what do you think?
I think that the Key Bridge, when it's rebuilt, the most important thing is to add fenders and dolphins like they have down in the Florida bridges to provide collision protection against something like that happening. It's the ship is akin to a Nimitz class aircraft carrier, but those dolphins would definitely help prevent and basically redirect the ship elsewhere. And in the meantime, they need to put those dolphins and fenders in front of the Bay Bridge, so God forbid it doesn't happen there. I'm concerned that Congress is going to need to jump in and help out here, in addition to the $60 million that the Biden administration provided. But I'm worried about Mike Johnson, even though he's from Louisiana, where he was experiencing a Hurricane Katrina, and this is a bipartisan moment. And I hope that we can get the necessary legislation passed to deal with the primary and huge secondary economic impact of the loss of this bridge.
All right, Shannon and then Billy.
It is most assuredly a tragedy. I hope that there can be some closure for the families of those most impacted and the victims on the bridge. But it is also an opportunity for us to build back better and stronger and really improve the infrastructure of the area. We're gonna all feel it until it's done, both from traffic and supplies and all sorts of things. And I would also say that we really need to pay special attention for the businesses that are directly impacted from loss of revenue in that area as well.
Billy.
My primary concern is about the victims and their families. This is a terrible tragedy, and it has uncovered how much low-wage workers who do these very dangerous jobs get exploited and get thrown into situations that before they can handle them. And the fact that nobody contacted the men who were on the bridge is both shocking and sad, because they had no way to get out of harm's way, and they could have had a way to get out of harm's way.
What do you think that would have been?
They could have been notified in time to get them off of the bridge. That's what the timeline suggests, and I'm very familiar with this because I represent one of the people involved, and so we've taken a deep dive into this, and we're still doing our investigation. I'm not ready to say anything profound, but this is a real human tragedy that could have been avoided, not just in a technical sense, but for example, if the men had radios out there, and they didn't, or if when the May Day had been first announced, someone got them off of the bridge. But if you can't even communicate with them because they don't have walkie-talkies and radios, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
I'm actually glad, though, in general, the conspiracy theories that we've heard aside, I'm glad. I do think that this has been more of a come together moment for the city of Baltimore, both with the tragedy and with the effects of the bridge itself being gone. And that's good to see. It's good to see that there is still something that we can kind of rally around. And, I also think that this bridge collapse is a thing that is going to impact the election coming up, the mayor's election coming up. And given how I think stable Brandon Scott has seemed throughout the course of this tragedy, I think it's good for him.
Richard, the president is going to visit the bridge site today. And to echo what Billy said, there are still 4 bodies that need to be recovered. And it's heartbreaking when you hear that they believe that those bodies are commingled and attached to a lot of the debris and crumpled steel that's underwater. But that's the biggest priority, as Billy said, to deal with the victims and their families. And I hope that can get done sooner versus later. And one other last point about the dolphins and fenders to protect bridges. There are 4,200 bridges in the U.S. over waterways that have roadways, and only 1/3 of them have collision protection. And I really think on a larger scale, we need to look at some additional protection for those bridges as well.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. And I want to point out also that Joe Biden has made a commitment to fully fund the new bridge. And that is a very, very important commitment from the president. And
I have this
one last thing that we have. There have been a huge amount of racist comments made about from far right-wing Republicans about this being the result, this tragedy being the result of hiring Black people, Latinos, and other minorities, because they're blaming it on what they call DEI. And I think Brandon was absolutely correct to say that's because they don't want to use the N-word. But that's what they mean. And it's horrifying that right before our eyes, where all of us know better than that these Republicans are making these fantastically false claims about what caused this accident. They'll be ashamed of themselves. And what are you going to do? Because they have no shame.
And
wait a minute, it's not like the Republican Party is doing this. It's a bunch of cranks on Twitter. It's not representative of things that Republicans are saying.
No, they're members of the leadership that have already spoken out. I don't have the names memorized, but
Mitch McConnell, Greg Johnson.
The outrage in my head is because elected officials have joined in this. Now, if you want the names, I'll find them and get them to you.
Mm-hmm.
Richard,
I should be curious to know, because I think to politicize this in any way, shape, or form is kind of something to be ashamed of. I'll put it that way. This isn't about a party. This is about people that lost their lives. These are about people that are impacted and will be impacted for years. So to bring partisan crap into it is wrong on any level.
And Richard, let me say, to echo what Billy said, good for Brandon Scott for firing back at the DEI insult by saying that he knows that it stands for democratically elected incumbent. Good for him.
Well, I have this from the Baltimore Banner, which is really ironic. This is a few weeks before he was elected governor of Maryland. Wes Moore participated in an online fundraiser with Hillary Clinton, who had this advice for Wes Moore, quote, literally, you could get inaugurated and there could be a flood or a bridge collapse. Telling Moore, people will judge you more on the disaster and crime response than on any other policies a governor might pursue. So it's just nuts. you mentioned that to him. Shannon, did you have anything to say about this, the racial stuff? Oh, you did.
I
You did.
do, but I've always got more on that.
Hmm.
DEI, for those that are misconstruing it, DEI was a philosophy that was built to bring folks together, not be divisive. So for those that are perverting it to make it divisive, shame on you. Because the diversity, equity, and inclusion means, simply put, from a biblical faith perspective, there's more that binds us than divides us. And if we all focused on that, I think we'd have a lot of different outcomes, both abroad and domestically. That's number one. Number two, a very good friend of mine was a professor who created the first program for diversity, equity, and inclusion, a certificate program out of Cornell, who just passed away about a week or so ago. So when I tell you all that that is not how diversity, equity, and inclusion was supposed to be used, I sincerely do mean that. And I hope that it can be used for the purpose it was created, which is to unite us by the ties that bind us and the things that we have in common.
Billy.
Well, what the public needs to know, especially the Black community, because young people have kind of tuned out of these kinds of matters. And when they tune in, they don't have the information that they need to understand what's really going on. And that is that right-wing Republicans also stand for racism. And Donald Trump is a racist. And look, all you need to know to determine that is not just his record, but the racists in America overtly love him to death. They consider him one of them. And he hasn't done anything to decouple from that point of view. And so we're still dealing with overt racism, unfortunately. Donald Trump started the overtness of it, and the Republican Party is enthralled to him. They're his puppets, and they do what he says do. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of racist backlash. The other thing that we're seeing is, as a result of Donald Trump eliminating affirmative action because he put judges on the court that he knew were going to do that, there are lots of lawsuits everywhere by people who are saying Black people are getting too much, too many Black people doing this, too much of that. And it's going to wreak havoc in this country unless we reverse it.
All right, we
Billy,
have,
being an attorney, I'm sure you have a mastery of the English language and know the power of words. So to say that Republicans in general and totality are in any one step, lockstep, or any other way is wrong and disrespectful, because you sure don't like it when other folk talk about all Black folk being the same. So let's be real careful about our words and how we want to lump folk into
I'm talking about the Republican leadership that has revealed itself to everyone. And I'm surprised that you don't understand what they're doing. I mean, this is the stupidest group of politicians we have ever seen in American history, or at least in my lifetime.
The stupid is
They
not
can't
restricted to one
hold it,
party, Billy.
hold it. They can't get anything
That's something
done.
that is free and inclusive to
Hold on.
everybody.
They can't get it. I'm talking about the Republican
Black
leadership.
communities have been led by Democrats for what, 60 years now, and look at the inner cities of America. That's all I can say. Maybe
No,
some
you-
The
Republicans were in
new
charge.
slave owners in the
Maybe
Black
some
community, Billy,
Republicans
look
were
like
in charge
you
of those
and look like me.
areas.
Don't
They would
play
be
with us
fired
on
and
that.
properly
that the
fined.
Democrats have tried to do
Yeah,
to
right. They've
remedy
tried
the
so
race
hard.
problem.
They've
The
given millions and
Republicans
billions of
have
dollars to these
just
communities,
a minute.
and they're still
If the
terrible.
Democrats have
Just a minute.
tried so hard to fix the race problem, why are we still here? You can't talk about the racism in Baltimore City is because of the Republican Party, because ain't none been elected.
Oh,
Let's be real
bullshit.
about that. Come on,
Bullshit. Bullshit. They've
Tell me a
been
Republican
against
that's been
every
elected in the last 50
Hold
years.
on, hold
One in the
I'm
last
not going to
50
hold
stand
years.
on,
here.
guys.
I'm
Come on
Shannon,
now.
not going to stand here and put up with this level of ignorance. All you've got to do is follow the news. All you've got to do is listen to what the Republicans say. They are unified because they are all fearful of Donald Trump. If the worst thing in the world they can do is criticize Trump publicly, not go along with Trump. We all know this except you too. And they're a
No, we
racist
all
party.
don't. And it ain't
Their
just us
I'm not a
two.
Trump
policies,
supporter.
hold it.
Look,
And for you to
Their
categorize that
policies
again,
are
Billy, come on, man.
look. The truth
The
is
only
that
fear mongering I
I'm
see right
sorry
now
you all
ain't
don't
Trump
see it.
on this program.
Hold on. Quiet. Stop these attacks. And you're all talking at the same time. Our thousands of viewers can't follow this. But we must take a quick break. to relax for just a moment. Here's the voice of Square Off Howard Madison. Howard, we'll be back.
Thank you, Richard. You know, the way some people drive these days, auto accidents are on the rise. And if your car's been in an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more people are trusting their auto repairs and auto maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models. They offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So give them a call at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And Baltimore is one of the best diner towns in the country. And the most popular of all the diners are the Double T. TT, totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the Double T menu offers you so many choices. You'll want to order everything. With locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, Monday nights are lobster nights at By the Docks in Middle River, all part of the Double T family. Now back to you, Richard.
All right, well, you got to say hi to Jeff down at Leading Edge. They're terrific. They've done our cars. You can't beat them. I'm just telling you that. Don't listen to your insurance company. Listen to them. Wait, Chris, hold on a second. Because we need to get over to Annapolis, where lawmakers are trying to wrap up a pair of juvenile justice bills. There was a major announcement from Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates accusing 20 juveniles in a crazy spree of armed carjackings, armed robberies all across the city. Now, I'm going to have details of that coming up in a moment, but Ivan Bates, the state's attorney, and Mayor Scott are in a serious feud. Now, here's the reason. Bates was scheduled to release the details of these 20 law-breaking juveniles. He was going to do it on Wednesday morning at a big press conference. But Mayor Scott apparently broke the news to some media outlets on Tuesday and again on Wednesday morning, which really ticked off Ivan Bates, who called Scott's revealing Bates's investigation details. Scott's revealing the Bates investigation details a political stunt. Scott's office says the mayor, quote, has always worked to be a partner with the state's attorney without political gamesmanship. Bates compared the mayor's actions to the person who didn't do the work for a group project, but then puts his name or her name on the list and says they did it. What do you think about this? The feud? Then I'll tell you about the incidents.
Well, I think it runs deeper than that. And I don't know whether it's fixable. I think Ivan Bates has done an excellent job so far as state's attorney. He's handled himself with dignity. He is doing a lot of the same things to reform the police department that Marilyn Mosby did. He is showing a sober judgment under fire. His crime initiatives are thoughtful. So I'm very happy with his performance so far. Now, do I agree with everything he's done? No. I mean, I take issue with some of the reforms that he wants to make in the juvenile area. And that leads me to this point. If people don't feel as though they're going to pay any consequence for their behavior, they keep doing it. That's a fundamental rule of human nature. And if we don't manage that by creating consequences that will cause at least thoughtful juveniles not to do it again, or do it in the first place, then we're going to see these kids continue to run wild. Nobody yet has come up with anything resembling an immediate fix to the problem, except making them feel accountable for their behavior by arresting them and charging them. And I'm all for that.
You're Billy Bustering for a change, but we want to talk about the feud how this could affect perhaps the election
Yeah.
or things like that.
I think
And then I'll go into details about the crime. What, Dan?
I think it's politics, to get back to the feud. I think it is Brandon Scott wanting to jump out ahead. I agree with Billy. Ivan Bates, I think, is doing a terrific job, and I think he's quite popular in the city. And I think that Brandon Scott, in a tough election fight, kind of maybe moved a little too quickly to sort of piggyback on that success. I also thought one thing that Brandon Scott said was very, very interesting. He said Ivan Bates said. Ivan Bates sort of implied that Brandon Scott would prefer the previous state's attorney to him. I don't know if that's true, but I do think that the progressive philosophy that Brandon Scott has, you could say in his heart of hearts, is closer to that of Marilyn Mosby than that of Ivan Bates.
Chris?
So something needs to be done. And I know they're still working on tweaking to the juvenile justice reform bill, bringing in amendments from the Senate to the House version. And, they'll have it all wrapped up, or they won't, by Monday. But the reality is that car thefts were up 160% last year from the previous year. And it's gone from the Hyundai Kia challenge that we've talked about before. I mean, how fast can you start a car with, basically just a handful of tools, to armed carjackings and robberies. And Billy's right, there needs to be consequences. The question is, how do you do that with kids, some of whom are still in grade school? It's heartbreaking to see that. And I think it is interesting that Bates is tying in with this latest arrest of these 20 juveniles, the new twist, which is parental accountability, to add in the contributing to the delinquency of a minor charge that a lot of parents might face for something like this. It's a complicated problem. It's going to be continuing even after this session is passed, regardless of how the bill is adjusted. But the reality is something needs to get done. There were as many as 16 incidents happening in one night of car thefts with handguns. And I don't know if it's gonna get resolved, but something needs to get done. This incident has affected almost all 9 of the police districts in the city. So it is widespread. And we just need to work together with these kids to try to get them off this spree that they're engaged in.
Shannon?
I think this is one of the few topics I can actually agree wholeheartedly with Billy. Ivan is doing a great job with a really tough problem. It is a fine line to walk between accountability and punitive measures. And I think Ivan's attempts at getting juvenile justice reforms in a way that children understand they'll be held accountable for their actions is definitely the way to go. I think letting parents know that they will be held accountable for their children's actions if they are not indeed doing everything they can to do their due diligence to properly raise their children, I think is on the right track. There are going to be folks that don't agree with it. I get it. And as far as Mayor Scott, I believe he's in that place of re-election mode and trying to grab every piece of spotlight he can. But his efforts to do that show some, I'm going to call it what it is, personality defects that we all need to be cautious of. Ivan is doing things in a way that he's running an investigation. There are things that need to be done in a way that they need to be done, decency and order. And to jump the gun and put these things out there, if that's the kind of mindset and mentality Mayor Scott has, he could end up jeopardizing some of the ongoing work from Ivan Bates' office.
Okay, tell you what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go into some of the specifics that Chris already talked about. Here's Howard one more time, and then we will do that. Howard?
Thank you, Richard. Richard and I are proud to represent the law firm of Barry Glazer. Barry always goes the extra mile for his clients, whether it's been a personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect. Barry and his staff, that includes an in-house doctor, make no apologies for getting top dollar from the insurance companies. His clients are his best advertising. So next time you need a lawyer, give Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568. He gets results. Tell him Richard Sher sent you. For
Yeah,
special occasions, group and get-togethers, or just date night, Pappas Restaurant and sports bars belong at the top of your list. Enjoy their award-winning crab cake, or as Richard calls it, the fab cake, and a great selection of steaks, seafood, and other mouth-watering treats. Pappas is Oprah's favorite, and they ship their crab cakes all over the country. 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air. Pappas food, service, and atmosphere is second to none. Back to you, Richard.
All right, so let's talk a minute about this Ivan Bates situation. Members of this group, 12 years old to 17. According to Mayor Scott, they had their home base or hang out in West Baltimore. State's Attorney Bates says these juveniles were involved in as many as 53 incidents, with more than a dozen being committed in one weekend or even one night. The majority of these crimes were armed carjackings. And in Bates's words, the investigation exposed a crime spree that would begin in one district, moving throughout the city. Only the Northwest and Northeast districts appear untouched by this juvenile gang. One of the bills being considered in Annapolis would increase the number of charges that children ages 10 to 12 could now face and allow judges to extend young people's probationary periods. And of course, as Chris mentioned, the parents could be held accountable. So what do you all think about what's going on there with Ivan Bates and with this investigation? Youth crime, juvenile crimes. Anybody?
Yeah, no, I think it's I appreciate what Ivan Bates is trying to do. I think it's right that they need to hold some accountability, hold these kids accountable. I don't know about charging parents. I've never really been totally comfortable with the idea that a parent is going to be charged for a crime that their child commits. If it works, I mean, yeah, okay. But really, you have to ask yourself what the underlying reason that 10 to 12-year-olds are getting involved in this kind of behavior. You do have to look at the parents, because the fact of the matter is, all too often, the parents aren't there. The parents aren't in the picture, or there's only one parent in the picture, or there's no father in the picture. These are the underlying causes of this issue, and those need to be addressed first and foremost.
Billy.
I've said my piece on this, and I'm interested to see how it develops, because there's a mayor's race. This might result in a change of endorsement or a variety of possible consequences. It could ultimately have a serious effect on the mayor's race if, for example, Ivan decides to endorse Sheila Dixon because he can't work with this mayor. That's one of the possible consequences. And so stay tuned. This is going to be a test of both of their leadership. And let's see if they can rise above this so that we get statesmanship instead of bickering.
God, you guys are quiet.
Yeah.
So quiet.
I think it would be.
Oh,
it would
by
be
the
really
way,
though,
since
if,
we have a lull, I looked
wanna-
on the internet about and I found a Republican official who is running for governor in Utah, which is one of the most racist states in the country, had the worst record of on civil rights legislation, voting rights, etc. He said, "This is Baltimore's DEI mayor commenting on the collapsed Frasty Scott Key Bridge." And he also said this. He said, "This is what happens when you have governors who prioritize diversity over the well-being and security of citizens." In other words, the Black people are to blame for this bridge collapse. So what do you think about that?
Well, I haven't heard the governor of Utah saying anything like that, but
I just quoted him.
you quoted it, but I'd have to take a look at it. But I want to go back to the Ivan Bates thing, the Ivan Bates, Brandon Scott thing. Ivan Bates, I don't think will end up endorsing anybody, because if Ivan Bates endorses somebody, there's a chance that the other guy might win. And Ivan Bates, it's very, very important that Ivan Bates maintains a good working relationship with whoever's mayor, whether that's Sheila Dixon or whether that's Brandon Scott. So he has to be very, very careful.
Unless this problem is viewed by him ultimately as unfixable, and he is looking for, as he says, a better partner to fight crime.
Yeah. I mean,
And so we got to stay
it's just,
tuned.
it's very risky.
This
It's
is an
very risky.
emerging issue, and I'm sure that there will be future developments of significance.
Well, while we were on the air, while we are recording this program on Friday, the date, what is today's date anyway?
April 5th,
What is it?
April 5th.
Friday, April 5th.
It's April
Friday,
5th
April
day.
5th.
A 4.8 magnitude earthquake struck New Jersey, Friday morning. It rattled parts of Maryland and other surrounding states. Yankee Stadium was definitely felt. Earthquake ahead of home opener. The field was shaking. Of course, this will be the lead on most of your newscasts, network newscasts. But what about earthquakes? I remember one that shook Baltimore years ago. Chris, are you familiar with any earthquakes?
Yeah, I was in court when one happened in Montgomery County. This was a long time ago. And as I mentioned when we were off the air, I was making an argument. It was a motions hearing in front of a judge, and it literally happened while I was speaking. And at the end of it, the judge looked at me and said, "Mr. Kennedy, that was a real earth-shaking argument you just made, but I'm not going to buy it."
Did you win? Did you win?
No, he ruled against me, and to this day I blame Mother Nature for me losing that motions hearing.
Anybody
Well,
else?
we were on the, hey, Richard, we were on the 23rd floor when the earthquake hit Baltimore, that was centered in Virginia. And the building actually swayed. And the first time that it shook the building, I said, "Hey guys, I think this might be an earthquake if we feel it again." And then it swayed even bigger, and we got the hell out of Dodge. And it was a frightening experience. And so that was a minor quake compared to what we're talking about in New Jersey and what we've seen in Japan and what we've seen around the world.
I've been in 2 earthquakes, one in California and one the Virginia quake that we're talking about, and the Virginia Baltimore quake that we're talking about now. And it's funny how different the reactions are, because they happen so infrequently in this part of the country. And people are just like, "Oh my God, an earthquake. That's unbelievable." In California, you have an earthquake and it's just like, a Tuesday. And they're like, "Okay, well, whatever, it's another earthquake." Also, the thing you have to remember, which makes it more dangerous, is that in California and the West Coast, the buildings, the infrastructure is all built to withstand those kind of smaller quakes. Out here, if you remember in Washington, D.C., the Washington Monument cracked, the National Cathedral had to be redone because of the earthquake. So, these should be taken very seriously on the East Coast.
All right. Well, we're sort of out of time. Billy, thank you very much. And Chris also. Pastor Wright, you are Wright from Maryland, of course. And the amazing talker of talkers, Dan Joseph. We ran a lot of things. We'll have to see what goes on with Bates and Scott, and with the earthquake in New York, and with the heroic work that's going on at the site of the bridge collapse. We will be looking for new panelists, additional panels, not new panels. We're going to be adding to our staff. So if you're interested, let us know at squareoff.net. All right? I'll see you again next time. And once again, we square off. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Richard, for keeping this going for how long?
We're in our 41st year, and I feel
amazing.
great.
That's amazing.
Bravo.
See you guys.
Bye.